Um, and
What I like about modern society is that we're trying to melt more reference to you, um,
yes,
melt this idea of the separations of the gender, right? We would like to completely abolish this idea and form a singularity in the sense of being a human being, which brings forth the idea that it should become a lot simpler being a single parent without the necessity of a feminine or a male presence, vice versa, acid test, um, in raising a child.
um, it's a very, very interesting point.
So I don't think it will be abolished ever. I don't think. And once again, it's that exponential graph of we can get as close to it as possible, but it would never truly become an absolute. Is
Mm.
that one way or another? I do believe a female presence will absolutely be necessary in this child's life. That isn't that isn't stuck to the fact that it would need a mother. I think that it is possible to do that for even just female friends or female companions or accomplices or whatever the hell you want to call it, being in the child's life.
Mm-hmm. For COD. Um, here we
Okay.
here we are again. What a day.
Thank you for joining us. What a day indeed, dude. Has it been a little bit brutal for you boys as well?
I don't know, dude. It's been
Actually,
yeah. No, go, Chris.
actually, today has been a bit more chilled than the rest of the damn week that I've been encountered with. But today in particular has been a lot more relaxed, a lot more wholesome than in stark contrast to the
To
previous
yesterday.
bit of my week, where it's been just the news has been going around. I'm sure all of us know what we're
Everyone
talking
knows
about.
about Russia. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different sort of speculation. One that I'm not so willing to talk about in today's podcast. I
Yeah.
think we should rather steer away from political
I agree.
controversy and sort of keep it pure, if you know what I mean.
Dude, there's been enough pain. We don't need to fuel the fire by talking about it.
Yeah, so I don't know if the rest of you know, whoever our listeners are out there, I've been tasked with the duty of coming up with topics to discuss on our weekly or bi-weekly or tri-weekly podcasts.
I would
Uh,
just no. I would like to just the thing. There was you were the one that was like, we need a topic for our podcast, and so
I,
thus and
I
then
still maintain I maintain that mentality
I
that gives
agree.
a
It's just
proper.
we didn't co-opt you into the making of it. It was of your own volition.
Or perhaps it was self-inflicted. Anyway, uh, I don't cannot argue against that. Many things in my trials and tribulations in life seems to be self-inflicted in the first place. But one that I would actually like to discuss with the tribunal so far is the idea. I guess we can set the topic officially so far. Is the idea of single parentage through willingness to do so.
Oh, you mean
What I mean?
in the sense of
Well,
like as a single person undertaking the role of adoption or something
the,
like that.
adoption or even surrogacy.
Interesting.
The whole concept is that you are a single male or female or whatever the hell you want to define your gender as, and you are in many ways needing, trying, willing to have a kid in the time, but you don't want to rely on another biological being to do so. Um, at least through the conventional sense of marriage and eventually having one. I'm trying to say in the sense of, modernizing the topic and saying that the option is available to you through either surrogacy or incubation in a vat or adoption.
Okay, interesting topic.
So, like, I'm happy you're bringing it actually, because for the longest
Very happy.
time, I was very much team that baby. You know, I thought to myself that if we are going to progress enough technologically that we can actually do that,
But
and we can spare our women from going through that trauma, why not? And on top of that, we can try and cater for some potential genetic diseases, some potential faulty code that's going to happen. It could happen, if you will, and we can kind of eliminate that possibility and make sure that we have healthy, strong, and
well, that's
uh,
brilliant on the one side, but that's not really the direction that I wanted to take it in. I wanted to take it in more of a controversial sense of the expectation of modern society, in terms of like you're supposed to find a partner and have a child through them. You know what I mean? And on the other side, it is more not necessarily frowned upon, but less accepted, should I say, that you should have a child on your own through other means. Adoption is more accepted, but then again, it is still frowned upon if you don't have a partner involved with you. If you should choose single adoption as a single person. Do you know what I mean?
it's even more like it's even more difficult for you to not get approved if you're a single person on top of that, dude. So not only is there a societal and social stigma, but even in the actual system there's a stigma.
I really like that word stigma. Stigma, it's almost like virile, disease wise. What I mean.
I feel, it's
Okay.
kind of like built on this understanding that we are supposed to be these cookie cutter families, and me and you have talked about this so many times, Christian, where we're expected to be a certain way, like marry by a certain age, have kids by a certain age, have a house, have a car. And that is what the current societal understanding of a good, happy life is supposed to be. And then, some people don't want to opt in for that kind of way of living. And I believe the reason we're so against those people is just because it's a confirmation of the opposite. How dare you be happy with your kid as a single parent when I have done all this work to find a wife? And yeah, na 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 na. People are so scared
So,
of
so,
having their
so
beliefs challenged.
yeah, that's exactly the bedrock I would like to challenge in the conversation that is going forth in this podcast is why in this modern society, now that we have the means, now that we have the opportunity to single parents, why would it be frowned upon in the first place? I wouldn't even call it frowned upon, just not as widely accepted.
I think maybe it starts from this place of, what we grew up with. So, like, I can say that all of us, at the moment at least, have mothers. And all of us might not have been raised by our mothers, but all of us do have mothers. And those of us who did get raised by a mom, we kind of understand what that was like and how that worked. So, like, let's take you in this context, Christian. If you tell me you're gonna adopt a child, then I have to think to myself how I grew up and the mom I had in my life and what she did for me and how she took care of me. And now I have to try and shape that understanding, that personal information that I experienced throughout my life around you. And a lot of people just do not have the capacity to do that.
I agree. And that seems to be one of the greater topics that we are faced with a modern society where we have now we've now been given just recently the opportunity to actually be single parents without even without the option of adoption. Do you know what I mean? We can actually be biological single parents.
Um, I think the argument about, or at least in my mind, the problem that faces single parents It's exactly what Estian said. It's the biggest problem we have because I feel like each of the genders brings a fundamental different approach to parenting. And that difference in parenting is really beneficial. It might cause some conflict between in the kid as one raises it one way, one raises it the other way. But I think that dual natured is important, unless not saying that it's impossible for a single parent to do both. It's just a lot harder.
It
I think the
is. It
question is
is.
as well, are you going to be working a normal job
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to be a single parent as well?
There,
Because like
there we
taking care of a
go.
child is a lot of work.
There we go. If you don't have access to grandparents, for example, that can at least lend a helping hand in the situation, it becomes very, very difficult to be able to raise the child on your absolute own. It's almost impossible unless you're working from home, which which even then strikes.
When you are working at home.
Dad says even impossible if you are working from home.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Plenty of time.
raising a human child, specifically a human kid, on your I mean we see it in nature where predominantly the mothers raise the kids on their own, whether it be lions or birds or you know what I mean. Nature, typically the mother in most cases raises the child on her own. Whereas with human beings, we need both the paternal and maternal side of the coin to be able to raise this phenomenal being that is a human kid. Um, Mostly because of the social structures that we've been introduced to. You
Mm-hmm.
know, society right now requires both sides, especially with the rise of the millennials. It's almost impossible for a parent to raise a kid on their own unless they are in some way relying on external factors such as friends or family or extended family
That's
or
a very
So, like,
interesting
I
point.
want to bring a really interesting point in this context as well, because I believe the future we're moving and, on our way to basically is going to be one of more communal living again. So, like, you will be in an environment where there will be other people who could take care of your children, even though they might not be, direct family members. Like, we've shared our hopes and dreams for our future living situation as well, and that would be the ideal scenario for those things to actually work out, is
Dude,
to share the burden of raising children.
it's incredibly interesting as you bring that up because I remember when I was in Zimbabwe, we went to go see this chieftain and the guide that was taking us through the park, and it's basically a nature reserve park, and then some of the Khoisans still live there, so you can go talk to them and everything. But what he said that's very interesting is the raising of the kids isn't a person or a family's responsibility, it's the tribe's responsibility. Everyone is everyone's mother and everyone is everyone's father. And it brings up a very interesting point in regards to getting again more of the differing opinions to raising a kid, because I think a very
okay, but
hmm?
my counter argument to that right now is more of an urbanized point of view, where it's more independency leading towards leading in contrast to the communal raising of a child in say a tribal environment, where we are in a more modernized sense. Take America or Europe, it is far more difficult to have that communal environment. You know what I mean?
Oh, everybody's
I
a stranger.
agree in the sense of you talking like apartments and not, it's more of a you living in small little small places rather than one large communal area. I think i think you brought up a
And like just to add another thing
oh
there, Johan, like we're also not choosing the people we're around, which also
well, it's
influences
kind
our
of you
decision
don't
making.
really almost get to choose.
Exactly.
It,
Where in a communal area, you're basically choosing to be in that community and potentially choosing who is in that community with you.
I actually think it's more of a lack of choice in the communal tribal areas, in the less urbanized form of Africa, where it's like you don't really have a choice. Where you are is where you are. and one way or another, you're going to need the support. You're going to need the help of the community to raise this kid because of poverty or other unfortunate circumstances. One way or another, it is more of an empathetic point of view. Whereas in places such as urbanized ecosystems like cities, that there is a sense of independency, despite the fact that you're so clustered together. There is still this huge divide. It's far more difficult
It's
to ask your neighbor or the person that lives upstairs or downstairs from you to be like, hey dude, would you mind looking after my kid for the day? I would really appreciate it. There's like this,
it's very
why the fuck should I
interesting.
look after your child?
It is very interesting that the closer we've become to, or the closer we come to each other, the more divide there almost is in the, like, why is it a weird thing to go to, I don't know, talk to your neighbor or get into a decent enough relationship with them where you can ask them. Like, I mean, you're literally living next to each other. You walking, you're hearing, I don't know. It's this interesting mentality that's come across humanity. Almost,
So
yeah.
for me, it's the greater divide between professions. So in a more tribal sense of the existence, it's there's despite the fact that you're still separate, it's still very close together in the sense that there are those hunters, there are the other people that have to look after the community, the gatherers, the um, what you call patricians of the area that try to regulate, and it's still despite the fact that it's so different in terms of profession, you're still living in such a close environment. Like in the Serengeti, for example, you would still need to work together to make the community work together. Whereas in an urbanized environment, you get professions that are widely
Oh,
varied.
that's
It's
interesting. There's no need.
yeah, there would be no need. You get your biologists, you get your business analysts, you get your and it can vary to such a degree where it's just non-conformist in a sense, and it's so difficult to form a sense of community in that, and that's why there's a great divide, even though you're in such close proximity and living with one another. The fact that your professions differ so greatly, the fact that your lives are so grandly disparate in an economical sense, in a social sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see that. I didn't really think about it like that before. And it definitely does open the idea that it is very difficult to connect with people that you perceive yourself to have very little in common with.
Uh, So this is a problem that we're only facing right now in the very recent century, 1 or 2 centuries that we are facing as humanity. That there's this great divide in in the fact that we're living so close to one another, and yet we can be so vastly different in the professions that we strive towards, and
And come from
it,
different
it
places.
causes exactly, and it causes this idea that you should be able to be independent. You should be able to look after yourself and your children and your family completely on your own without the help of the society that is readily available right next door to you.
Which is completely unrealistic as well, dude. Like there's this beautiful, and in almost in the same vein as what Johan shared, this beautiful quote from a tribe as well, where if a child cries, the adults don't ask whose child is this. The closest adult picks up that child and takes care of them. And if we can extrapolate that to a whole, societal level, where if someone cries close to you, and you're close to the crying, you're the one that helps. And if we can do that, like the whole love your neighbor thing all over,
That
this
that would
world
be
is going to
grand.
change.
that would be grand, but that in our modern society, that is considered primitive and almost anarchistic.
What
You know, like
what I find very interesting is our or a lot of our almost withstanding towards learning from in quotation marks uncultured or underdeveloped ideas. It's been something that fascinated me for a very long time because why would we not use the ideas that have been cornerstone to get us here going forward? Why, yes, if a better idea comes, fair, but why are we reluctant to use old ideas? And I also understand that one thing people are going to tell you is, how can you trust someone to pick up and take care of your kid? Well, that's the problem. We, because of the divide, we feel like we're all strangers. So
where
it, yeah.
where did that sense of strangeness come from? Where did we suddenly become so distrusting of our neighbors?
I feel like Johan, you actually had very good points in the nature of how close we are to one another. And from a primitive perspective, having to try and hold on to as much as possible. Now, us being so close to one another, it causes that wanting to hold on to what you have to intensify because there's so many potential agents who could take something away from you.
It feels like somewhere, like Chris asked, we lost the communal, I want to call it love. The need and
Love.
yeah, the actual join together, we need to accomplish this.
So it's funny. I just want to mention this in the mid conversation where Johan mentioned love and I said love out loud. My father scoffed. My father comes from the boomer generation and he literally just scoffed. You know, when I even mentioned the word love in a communal sense, and he was like,
it
"Fucking."
I the thing is, I find it very very entertaining because
True
love
love
is,
now and
yes, input.
So he said to continue on in the conversation. My father said that true love from then and now is very different. The idea of love has been metamorphized completely
I agree.
from what it used to be to what it is now.
I agree. So why don't we metamorphosize it back? Don't mean take away everything that makes it what it is today, but why lose? I don't know. It just, you don't need to lose what individual love is. It doesn't mean because I love the person who lives next to me, I'm gonna love him more or her more than my wife or husband. It's not how this works. And I find it interesting. I find it very interesting.
So the reason I ask that is that this is a very bizarre state that we have been introduced to as humanity as a whole, is that we are given this opportunity to be single. Just to get back to the topic that we were talking about, is that we are given this opportunity to be single parents based off of either adoption or surrogate,
Or
um,
whatever means.
continuation. It's still in so many ways against the norm. Despite the fact that this opportunity and choice is presented to us, one way or another, it is still some way frowned upon, which to me is it's such a strange idea that this new thing is introduced and it is given a space in our normal society, but yet it is still considered to be
And
not okay.
people, I don't want to
Well,
say, yeah, go.
no, I just wanted to bring the point that we should consider that maybe it's an economical, thing. The reason we're in the state that we're in,
Yes,
the things that are believed in
yes,
is because it's economic to do so.
yes, because there's a clash. Some people are capable of doing that, some people have the economic backing and the finances to be able to do this comfortably, whether it be through hiring a nanny or even having the material necessity that would be sufficient to look after this child, whereas many of the other I don't want to call it normal, but maybe less privileged parts of society, which might want to be able to do these things, but don't have the background nor the capability, physical, material capability to do so. And once again, it causes another level of divide. Um, in many terms of retrospect, it's all well and good to present this gift to humanity where you don't even need a partner anymore, whether you be female or male, to have a child, but facilitate this to actually bring it forth into reality. It becomes so much more of a question of whether it is plausible. You know what I
I
mean?
what's been going through my head the whole time is I have always said that there are only two things you need before you can really have a kid. And I think they're the two main important. There's a bunch of things, there's a bunch of things subbed to these, but in broad terms, it's the emotional intelligence to raise a kid. And in the second one, it's the monetary value to raise a kid. Because as much as you don't care, as money shouldn't be a worry for you, you can't raise a kid if you don't have the monetary value to give them what a kid deserves. Um,
I agree.
and in
That
the
is that is that is that is a very obvious argument, though.
no, it is. But what I'm going to continue with is in that same sense, if you are emotionally intelligent enough to be able to play both roles of male and female with the monetary value,
Uh,
go for it.
okay, that's where one of the deeper topics that I wanted to discuss today comes in. Is I spoke to one of my colleagues about it, and he said it's all well and good for you to, even if you do have the monetary capability, the financial capability to do this, what about the female touch in
Mm-hmm.
raising a child? What about the feminine side that a kid will
Needs.
require in terms of being grown healthily, emotionally, and societally adequate? You know, and that was a very interesting question that was posed. One that I would like to discuss with you guys, because with the way that we're going forward in terms of feminism and the fact that equality should come in every way, shape, and form, why has it become so necessary to have this idea of a feminine energy in the child's life? Why wouldn't you be able to present that to the kid even as a male?
You absolutely could. I I now this is where me and my mom have had this discussion. Um and her argument, and I understand it to a degree, is no male will ever know what it's like to carry the kid. And because of that, there is a touch that a woman will have that is almost more sensitive, but in the same
Irreciprocable.
a little bit, but in the same sense, there are more than enough male single parents that have been able to provide their daughters with the female side that their mother just couldn't. The thing is, what's interesting to me is that the relationship that a male and a female has when they have a kid is they both play roles, And by both playing roles, they can more deeply invest into either or both roles by specializing. But there is nothing that stops either the male or the female from learning the traits that either gender has and being able to portray them.
I I fully agree. I fully agree that I think that we've evolved to such a state as human beings where you are capable of emulating the necessary characteristics for this kid to understand even the feminine side from a male perspective.
And what I think will be interesting is, let's say you have a daughter. Um, you'll kind of teach each other. Sounds weird, but the years of a
Yeah,
kid that are the most important are pre-10, in my opinion. From there on, you need to play a role, but it's not as in depth. You don't need to teach them how to use a spoon. You need to teach them to navigate
yes,
socially. That's
yes.
different.
So this is the argument of nature versus nurture where it comes in. Where I'm sure that even before our modernized and civilized existence, there was cases where female children were raised entirely by male parent, or female children,
Or parents.
sorry, or male children were raised entirely by female parents. I love using the example of the Expanse of what was his name? Um, he was my favorite character, and I can't remember his name.
Uh,
Uh,
the
Estian, help me out here.
you
The
told me the
character again?
mechanic.
Amos.
Amos. Yeah.
Amos, of
Where
course.
Amos was raised almost entirely by female and prostitute presences, and yet he is the most fucking alpha male presence I've ever seen. You know?
That's why I fundamentally think that. So the reason I say this is because if you think about your own life, your parents play an enormous role in it when you're young. It's literally everything you have revolves around them. And as you grow up, slowly you start disenfranchising yourself from them in small little increments. And each time you do, you take the wisdom that they have given you with you. But that wisdom that's been given to you is very rarely on the problem you have. Most of the time, the wisdom imparted is generalized wisdom that then gets
It's
extrapolated and
almost
applied.
non-gender, right?
Uh-huh.
It's non-gender.
I agree that in the early stages there are some things, like I guarantee you some people will have a hissy fit about the fact that you're not going to breastfeed your kid. But I wasn't breastfed. My mom hated doing it, so I was fed by goat milk for the first, I don't know, year and a half of my life, and I'm fine. Okay,
That
maybe I'm
explains
not.
why you were the goat, dude.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Then the question that I was gonna say, maybe I am not fine, and we just
But you came out to be a completely capable and
yeah,
fully functional human being.
yeah, because and my mom likes to say that that so I don't want to make it sound like she's narcissistic about it, but she likes to take credit for the person I've become. And fair, I agree, she's helped a lot in raising me, but mostly I've raised myself. Especially in today's day and age, with the amount of stuff you can see,
I
it's your
I
own
do have to say
responsibility.
I do have to say, for the listeners out there, Johan has been one of the most independent human beings I've ever come across. With his capability of actually living alone and being self-sufficient, it's been phenomenal in seeing the way he has developed. I have struggled majority of my life in being alone. I've only recently started living alone, whereas Johan seems to have taken it by stride. So whatever he says seems to be backed from just personal experience with him.
Thank you. Yeah, dude. It's very interesting. I very much think that what we need to start remembering is that kids no longer need or have no kids no longer only have their parents to teach them. And for a very long time in human history, it was the people around you and the parents. And then it translated to schools in later, and now it's the entire planet. Any kid with an internet access can learn anything he wants. And
What I like about modern society is that we're trying to melt more reference to you,
Yes.
melt this idea of the separations of the gender, right? We would like to completely abolish this idea and form a singularity in the sense of being a human being, which brings forth the idea that it should become a lot simpler being a single parent without the necessity of a feminine or a male presence, vice versa, acid test, in raising a child.
it's a very, very interesting point.
So I don't think it will be abolished ever. I don't think. And once again, it's that exponential graph of we can get as close to it as possible, but it would never truly become an absolute. Is that one way or another? I do believe a female presence will absolutely be necessary in this child's life. That isn't stuck to the fact that it would need a mother. I think that it is possible to do that for even just female friends or female companions or accomplices or whatever the hell you want to call it, being in the child's life.
And where the fuck did that thought go?
Got zoinked, dude.
Yep, dude, it's just gone.
Got straight zoinked. I got a thought zoinked today as well, where it was like, and
What is happening?
I had so much momentum, I was running, and then suddenly I hit a wall.
Oh, welcome. You're a human AI.
Fuck yeah, dude. With my
Quantum
nanobot
machine.
body.
Yeah, nanobot body and a quantum brain.
Yeah, dude, it's ridiculous. My human body.
Reassess what you were trying to say.
It was something down the line of, with this amalgamation that we are slow. Oh yes, I remember what I was. So I think it's very important for us to realize in today's day and age that no single piece of anything will work 100%. For something to function, it needs to be an amalgamation of ideas. And why I'm bringing that up is because, in the sense of the male and the female, let's take an example that
Here's a great example.
I'm good. The problem is, let's say, the one with females being paid less in the work environment. I'm going to use that one as an example. Most of the studies that have been done is that most of the time it is not sexism that is playing a role. There is absolutely some sexism, but not most of them. Most of the time what happens is that the feminine nature is to be more passive. Don't say it's everyone, please don't. But generally,
not just passive, but also at service.
Yes, that sounds terrible. It sounds like,
expectation.
Yeah, but it sounds terrible, but it is the nature of what it is. And what happens in a sense where most of it's ruled by the male authoritarian style of, I'm going to get shit done. When those clash, you have problems where one will overstep the other one. Thus, for these to coexist, there needs to be balance between the ideas. You need to be able to be both aggressive and submissive, both forward and back. I don't know how the better analogies, but yes, that is what I'm talking about.
So the argument that I wanted to bring up is in the case of, for example, gay parents, right? Where both are male in the relationship. Sure, one might be more feminine, but essentially both are male by nature. And yet still, there are more than sufficient cases out there in the world where gay parentage has brought forth phenomenal youth society.
It's how you raise a kid, dude. That's the most important thing.
So and that bleeds back into, yeah, sure, there might be two, whatever, in comparison to gay parents, in comparison to a single parent, whether it be female or male. And I love the idea that raising a child is very, very important in its early years, and the way that you bring it forth into the world and the way you introduce it to it. But one way or another, that child is going to get influenced by the rest of society around it, whether it be through preschool, nursery, high school. It's still going to get, through its own choices, influenced by the society around it. Am I correct in this?
Yep, 100%, especially with how
So
interconnected
it
we
doesn't.
are now.
So it doesn't matter how much you try to raise, for example, a girl be as male as bloody possible. There will still be aspects introduced to that child through society in the sense of maledom. And then vice versa, same argument. If you try to raise a boy as female as you possibly can, as feminine and as like, so very like different, and it'll still get influenced by the norms of society. So
A
it,
very
it,
primal.
for me, it's such a difficult thing to. That's why I wanted to bring it up as a topic for today. It's such a difficult aspect to say. Is it better to raise a kid as a lone parent, alone, no other partner in the relationship? Is it better to raise a kid on your own as a female or a male, or is it better to raise it together with another partner in the relationship? Now, what brings forth great fruition is the differing perspectives. I think that's
And
so very crucial and beautiful in the sense of raising the child, is the differing perspectives, is in the conflict of the opinions, the parents, that might actually lead to a greater
absolutely,
um
dude. I I
a
think, and so was I think that one of the greatest blessings that ever happened in my life was my parents' divorce. Because as much as I love my biological parents more than anything on the world, what I learned from my step parents, the additional information that they brought might not have been as impactful as my biological parents. Whether also the influence was dog shit or fantastic, it added so much more dimension to my young years of seeing perspectives from every different angle. And then, so yes, I absolutely think that having more perspective is good. It will always be good. But whether it is a fundamental need,
yeah, whether it is the bedrock of what it is to be a proper human being is a
I
completely
don't think
different
it
topic.
gives a shit. I think one
So,
person can do it.
like, I feel I want to touch on something you said as well, a little bit earlier, Yuan, in this context of the, wage gap. You were right. On a societal, on a species level, women are more likely to do certain jobs than others. And no matter how we raise our kids, these things are intrinsic to us as human beings. It's almost like programmed into us. And like if it's going to be a single male parent raising girls, there might be awkward things like, for instance, if your little girls get a period for the first time, like you're gonna have to
To deal
stand
with that.
in, yeah, in that role, and that might be something that would be easier for a feminine partner or a feminine parent to handle.
Not
But it doesn't mean that
impossible
you're in,
for
yeah,
a male
exactly,
parent.
exactly, but it doesn't mean you're incapable of doing it as a male.
Now, I think to add to that, I feel like with the ability to go, fuck, I have never dealt with this. Let me go read a book. It's not going to give you perfect understanding. It will never give you the experience understanding, but it will give you a good enough idea as to how to approach and handle the situation on a
and
base level. to be
Yeah,
absolutely acceptable. And then,
and
like
in
I
many ways,
said, yeah,
it's actually
sorry.
the effort that the parent in many ways it's actually the effort that the parent put
Mm-hmm.
in
When
to try
dude,
and help the child actually has a greater impact on the kid.
absolutely, like the videos you see of like single dads learning how to braid their daughter's hairs or something like that, and then just it's hard. Like I watched this video of this guy who had to try like 4 times to get his daughter a ponytail, and yeah, it's gonna be difficult. You're gonna have to do things you've never dealt with before. But if you're willing to put in the effort, who cares?
Which is almost in a funny sense even far more impactful as a male parent if you like take the effort, if you put in the time and you're like, cool, I'm gonna fucking learn how to braid my daughter's hair properly. It's almost even more um
Special.
bonding with the kid than if a female if a female parent did
when
it.
you are putting something different.
So my dad says when you're a person and when you are a parent are two different things.
See, that is the one interesting point that always causes me issue whenever I talk about parentship. That is because I don't know. I can only speculate. And I really hope that everyone that hears this understands that all of this is fucking speculation, because up until you have the kid,
Oh,
you're
same for all of us. Same for Estian. Same for me. This is all just theorizing.
and yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if the difference will actually be there between a parent and a person. But I think in the sense of the being a parent isn't just getting a kid. Being a parent is much more. It's being willing to sit down and learn new things to better your kid's life.
It's almost spiritual in a sense.
Yes, it's very you're connecting with this human on such a deep and emotional level as to bring them into life. And
Well,
then
I think the opportunity is there for you to connect on a deeper and spiritual level, and some people do take that opportunity. Unfortunately, a very rare percentage of people take that opportunity, whereas others prefer to take the more prehistoric and more brutal way of just raise the kid and it'll be fine if we do it based on these instructions.
again, I this is why the point about the book is interesting to me, because I I wonder how much of parentship is based off your own experiences and how much of it is just pure guesswork.
Both. Nearly all of it is both.
Do you think it's just guesswork almost all the
I,
time?
I, I the problem is that each child is so particularly personalized to the situation and context that you're in.
Compare yourself.
That it almost always it is guesswork.
Compare
That
yourself.
that that the intention, whether it be good or bad, and obviously preferably it would be good. The intention would always be good, but it is still guesswork. It at the end of the day, it's the way the child reacts to it.
Yeah. And I something that's also interesting to me, and I'm going to use a very primal example to explain something very complex, so just bear. But the same sense of how even if you raise a dog to be vegetarian, if you give it meat, it will still eat the meat. I think in a
Yeah.
very primal level, that's why I don't want to use it as like a good an analogy for human consciousness, the dogs eating. But I think it kind of works a little bit the same way. Regardless of what you teach your kid, it is still fundamentally their choice how they're gonna approach and react to the rest of the world and even what you tell them. Because some kids just refuse to listen.
And there comes an even deeper topic in terms of like capital punishment and like seeing your child. When is the appropriate time to hit your kid?
I got
Which idealistically should be never,
I got my
right?
ass beat, bro. I will
Yeah,
absolutely hit my
yeah,
kid if
yeah.
they
But
if they do something.
idealistically,
Hmm?
idealistically, you should never have to hit your child.
Yes, but it's
There
a
comes
kid.
there comes a time there comes a time where you have to understand that there just isn't any other solution for this bloody kid to learn
I
besides perhaps pain.
I think what's very interesting and why people don't like it is because they feel like it's child abuse and you do it the whole time. When I say I got beat, I got hit maybe 10 times in my life by my parents, 3 times by my dad and a couple times by my mom. Um and I always deserved it. Man, was I a bitch when I was doing what I was doing when I deserved it. You don't. It's you. Those extremes are extremes. You slap the fork out of your father's hand when they give you food. Yeah, no, you get beat. That's just that's just wrong. You don't hit food out of someone's hand when they're giving something. Those type of things that kids do.
See, you see, that's where I want to say that I was very privileged in that sense, is that I was beaten maybe 3 or 4 times in my entire life. And my sister is even the next level of that, where she has never, ever beaten her children. Not a single time. And yet they still grew up to, are still growing up, of course, but to be very beautiful and functional human beings. Which is to
100%.
say that there is those occasions where there is a child that you raise that doesn't even remotely require capital
Mm-hmm.
punishment in one shape or form,
Absolutely.
and and yet it's very very difficult to measure,
I
Like,
very
with
difficult to
talking
measure.
about, when it comes to things that are difficult to measure, I was thinking about this today. Our kids one day might not like us and want to
yeah,
stop spending time with us. And like when I realized that, I was like, holy shit, that is something our parents are scared of as well.
bro. What I say, your kid ultimately has the choice of what they want to do. They can completely stand against everything you stand for.
And what do you do in that situation? Like that's brutal, man.
Dude, it's
Like
like
literally someone you
one
cannot not love
dude.
doesn't agree with you.
So one of my so a while back, I won't say names, but my dad met the so I don't remember how the story happened, but anyways, they started helping this lady, him and his wife, uh, with she was a heroin addict, and her parents had given up on her because every time they tried to help her, she would just steal from them to buy more heroin. And after going to rehab, it would still happen. Eventually, they said, "Well, we love you to death, but we can't deal with you. You're gonna have to go out on your own and fix your own shit." That's also a possibility. I don't think the parents did anything wrong. You fall in with the wrong crowd. You read one or two wrong things. It's it's the fine line when you're a young adult who's just gotten into freedom. And yes, whatever your parents have taught you is definitely going to help in that situation. But one or two bad decisions and well, fuck. So to take it back to the topic, single parentship will most certainly be harder because there's so much more you have to
Yes,
look at and have to deal with. Nobody will claim that it'll be easier.
that nobody can necessarily help you with. So I have a colleague that I work with who is a single mom of 2 kids, and she
Mm-hmm.
comes to work every time almost ridiculously exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
like on a
So
emotional.
what?
Yeah, Dad, don't chime in here. Um, she comes in almost always entirely just done with life, and and just wants a break, wants a fucking holiday. Doesn't care how she bloody gets it, but she's so over it. You know, she can't handle it anymore, and I guess that comes as a consequence of having to be a single parent, especially with like two or multiple other kids. Um, and that's a byproduct that if you are a willing person that wants to be a parent to more than a single child or even a single child, that's something that you're going to have to accept, that you're
Mhm.
going to have to accept that the journey in that is going to be bloody brutal.
Dude,
It's going to be horrifically difficult.
I remember the most exhausted I have ever been in my very, very young life is when I was doing my large assignment for my degree. And the final week before the presentation of it, I think it was something stupid. Like we put in 90 hours over a week. And I remember getting to like day 4, and I said to one of my friends, all I want to do is have a mental breakdown. All I want to do is just break down, have a cry, and not do the thing. But you have no choice because you need to do the thing. Now imagine
Yeah,
that on the scale of looking after another human being that is fully dependent on you, and it's the entire time, it never goes away for
yeah.
10 years. And it is what is very important about this argument that we haven't really mentioned yet is that you are going to need to be so mentally stable to keep
Yeah,
yourself alone mentally stable while trying to keep
morally,
someone else.
morally, the decisions severely deplete.
Yes. And this is the problem that I haven't mentioned with like my biggest problem about voluntarily single parents is that you have the possibility. I'm not saying it is a certainty, but like you get shitty parents, some people will think that they are capable and not be. And in that sense, you have fucked the kid.
And
Because,
on top of that, they're not willing to actually continue on the journey that they have supposedly committed to.
yep, and that is a genuine fear, and why I said that you need to be emotionally and monetarily. It's the most important things, and emotionally even more than if you were a couple, because a couple can cry to each other and then deal with it or share the burden or things like that. But a single parent, fuck.
I think it's in the case of the single parent, in a situation where you think that you would be ready to be a single parent, it is still so vitally important to have the emotional backing through either friends or family
Mm-hmm.
to be able to tackle this paramount task, you
Yep.
know, where it's just so I don't care how ready you think you are. If you've never had a child before, I
You
don't
have no
think you
idea.
can be
You have no
prepared. You
idea.
you
Yep.
don't have an idea. No matter how many books you read or videos you watch or studies that you try to accommodate into your life, you will never be truly ready until you experience it for a fact. And I think the greatest thing that you can do as a single parent is have a lot of friends. And I mean close friends. And I
Yeah.
mean true friends,
But
genuine
bro,
friends.
I need a break. Please take care of the kid. Please. Type deal.
And in
Yeah.
many ways, I think that could be so fruitful and beautiful for the kid as well. It's like
Oh,
imagine having not just a single parent, but a multitude of different parents
dude,
that
you
have
have one
loved you and
parent
have
and incredibly close uncles or aunts, or in that sense, it would be incredible.
Like, and we have a friend, I won't say the name, who I believe grew up with some of the best parents in the world, who took him in and wanted to only give him love.
Dude,
And the way
yeah.
we the way we think about that and the way we treat those people, it's also not necessarily a one-to-one of having loving parents equals this turnout. Like,
Yep.
and that's something we have to take into consideration.
Dude, I think I know who you're talking about.
I know you know.
Yeah. And I think that's a very good representation of the possibility of what could happen. That I don't know, maybe the fact that they don't have a mother or something like that could mentally affect your kid. I don't know, we haven't even gone into the mentality of what if you were raised knowing you're a vacuum baby? Would that
Yeah,
impact you? Would
I
you?
mean, I think so.
Of
Yeah,
I
it
course
also
would.
think
it
so.
would. It would
Absolutely.
always impact you.
I
It
wonder
would
to what
always
degree.
impact you.
So, but
But that's
now we have
that's
to
that's
ask,
where
is it going to impact our child negatively?
That's what
Because no matter,
yeah.
even like, I mean, I came out of a vagina, that is impacting me. It's not necessarily impacting me negative. Well, I wasn't actually. I came out of a
I
C-section,
was
to be
also
completely
C-section.
honest. So, even though I know that and I understand that and it's impacting me, it's not necessarily something that is a part of my life or my active daily thinking.
yeah,
Where
but
it might be if
that's
you're
the
a
funny
VAT
thing.
baby or if you're adopted, for example. Like,
That
these things can have more significance depending on the situation.
that's the funny thing. That's where it becomes the kid's responsibility on how to interpret these things and how to intake these things and how to respond to these things. You
Mm-hmm.
can
And
do
for
you
a
can you can
second,
give the child the entire world. You can give the child all of the monetary value, all of the materialistic. Yes, it is that. You can give the kid all of the necessities that would idealistically be necessary to raise a kid in the greatest of environments, and yet it will still fall down to the child on how to interpret these circumstances.
Yep. That's why it's parentship is a fucking weird thing, dude. Like I look at all my so currently 3 out of my 5 cousins have kids. One of them is 4, and the other two are 6 months and 7 months. And that's why I very much think that when I look at those and how fundamentally associated is the wrong word, fundamentally need that kid has to its parents, how your that afhankelijk, what's that in English?
Dependent.
Dependent, thank you. Um, those kids are on their parents is ridiculous. But the moment you take it a little farther, your kid has full rule over his own life. And all the choices and the infinite power that you and I and Estian and every other person has in the world to make choices is theirs too. And I think there and now this is what I'm going to bring up. I also think that there are more gender independent understanding that is valuable than there is gender dependent valuable understanding.
I agree.
Because the understanding of the power of your mind is completely gender neutral, but it is ultimate. It is above almost anything else. So I
I
very
agree.
much wonder.
And that's why I say that we as I would like to be an advocate, and mostly because based on personal circumstances, but I would love to be an advocate for the ability for a single parent to raise a very functional and capable human being.
Absolutely.
I think it is.
like to have perfect life.
Dad says, coming from the boomer generation, he says, "You would like to have a perfect life."
I would.
But I think that it is something that should be possible under the correct circumstances, under the correct
Mm-hmm.
environment. I think it's one way or another. Even if you came
Have
from
seen before.
a poverty-ridden, a poverty-stricken background, I think even one way or another, it should be possible to raise a very beautiful and
Yes.
wonderful child.
Once we have perfect environment, the question.
So it's been done before in history, one way or another. Single mothers, single fathers. It's not a new thing. It's not a new idea. It has been done over and over and over again with the niche cases in society. It has been thing, and I don't think that it should be something that is discouraged or frowned upon or excluded or what's the right word? Uh,
Humanized, porn,
no, not dehumanized.
or
Dehumanized because one way or another, I mean, there throughout history, we've had single parents.
um,
Whether
I truly
and
believe.
now and especially now, I mean the great divide in social structures, whether it be through gender quarrels and just not liking one another, which seems to be becoming more and more predominant in society, where we're just like, I just can't stand another person. I would rather be alone. Um, but I would still like children. And the capabilities are available to me to still have a child, even without another partner. Um,
I,
it, it's something that you can't take that away from another human being. It's based on the fucking
I,
box that they have box that they have grown into, that they have not been given another choice in. Who's to say that Carl down the street isn't allowed to have children? Why?
and
You know that
what's a
that
very
topic needs to be off.
an
Go
interesting
for it.
question that lands for it as well
And
is
oh,
um
one.
with um let's I don't know what the right term for this is, but with some countries having larger male or female populations, some people literally will not get a spouse. Not because of
Yeah.
it, numbers wise, it's impossible. Do those people lose the ability to get a kid too? I don't think that should be a thing. If they're capable, and I do mean truly capable, because fuck me, have I seen some terrible parents. Fuck, bro.
You and me both, bro.
Um, but if you're capable, no, with the advanced technology that we have now, biology should not stand in the way anymore. That's at least how I feel.
Idealistically, I like using that word in this podcast.
Yeah, because fuck me, do
Idealistically,
we
of
talk
course.
about ideals?
Don't you dare say
Yeah, of
fundamentally.
course. Don't I dare say
Fundamental
fundamentally.
problems.
Idealistically, of course, it would be brilliant. It would be absolutely gorgeous to have a mother and a father, and you have a child through the conventional means. Brilliant. It would be the best case scenario. But a person that has just been given the short end of the stick, just hasn't been able to meet a partner, and yet they're fully capable of having a child and raising them sufficiently. Why do they not get the chance just because of biological boundaries?
Only it is depending how you have girl.
Yeah, depending on how you have girl. Um,
Well, I'm
essentially, I think um, I just think that everyone, especially now, I'm not talking about 100 years before, or 200, or even the rest of the whole of human history before. But I'm saying now we have the opportunity to do so without a partner. You know?
Yep, and
Uh,
I think it's very important to realize that the past you use as a guide, because it should also only ever be a guide. Everything differs. The moment
so it's a
we
very it's a, it's a very new and controversial topic. It's one that we haven't explored sufficiently to make a constitutional agreement on. But I do believe that it is a direction that we should strive towards as humanity. Is that people that are capable of have the monetary capacity to do it should be given the opportunity and the chance to make it a reality.
Yep.
And I know this has been happening. Actually, this has been happening where single parents have gone and gotten surrogate children, even though it's not as much as adoption. But it's something that should be okay.
Should be thought about and understood, and that it can provide.
And I feel on that note, it's such a good time to finish it off. Johan, if you'd be willing to save this podcast as dudes that aren't parents talk about being parents.
I will
And-
absolutely call it that. Dudes that
And
aren't
I
parents.
look forward to like referencing this when we are actually parents, just to see what we were saying and what we
Dude,
were thinking.
how
Maybe
wrong-
laugh at ourselves.
Yeah, maybe we are
congratulate ourselves.
So wrong. Potentially, we are so far missing the mark. But
Potentially, we have gone and become a Nazi regime and have fucked the whole idea
What
sideways.
do you mean by this?
Dad, please. Anyway,
That's so funny. I love
Well,
everyone.
we'll have to have
so
Dad as a
much.
guest next week, dude. Tell him he has to, get himself ready. Has to dress up and everything.
But all right, boys, I think that is the final point of this podcast. Listeners out there, love and light for all of you. Take our opinions and our conversations with a pinch of salt. Please don't take it as a serious and opinionated topic.
Love you, boys.
Love and light to you, brothers, as well. I really enjoyed this one, and I'll see you guys next week.
I really
Or
enjoyed it as
perhaps
well.
not next week,
Thank
and
you
the
for
week,
bringing
the,
such
the
a
week
good
after
topic.
that, or the brilliant. All right, boys and girls. Adios,
No.
muchachos.
Love you, brothers, so much. We'll see each other soon again. Cheers, cheers.
Bye.